So last month, a small California city awarded a nearly $1 million contract to an outside firm.
Right?
And this was just to figure out how to manage its affordable housing. But then, almost at the exact same time, they're authorizing hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy like heavy machinery.
Just to cut down weeds and move dirt, basically.
Exactly. So today, welcome to our deep dive. We are opening up the literal operating system of a local government.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
We've got this dense stack of recent city council agendas and draft minutes from the city of Gilroy, California. This is covering March and April of 2026.
Right. And our mission here is to extract the hidden narrative within all these documents. We're going to decode how a municipality balances, the visionary high-level goal setting with the gritty, day-to-day administrative reality of just, well, keeping the city running.
Right. Because if you live in a municipality, you're interacting with this infrastructure the second you step out your front door.
Oh, 100%. But the sheer administrative weight that it takes to, keep the streetlights on, keep the community safely growing, enforce complex zoning laws, all of that is largely invisible to the public.
Totally invisible.
Yeah. But these agendas provide a masterclass in the legal and physical machinery needed to run a modern city. It's this highly calibrated balancing act.
It really is. And the contrast between those two modes, like the strategic dreaming and the mechanical execution, it is stark when you look at the chronology of these meetings.
Right. Let's look at the dates.
So during the March 25th and April 2nd study sessions, the council is operating like purely in visionary mode.
Yeah, big picture stuff.
Exactly. You have Mayor Greg Bodzo and the council bringing in a facilitator, Dave Sykes, and they're focusing on priorities and work plan goal setting.
Right. They're listening to the community.
Yeah, they're taking public comments from residents like David Leal, who are actively pleading with the council to develop a comprehensive plan to attract more people to downtown Gilroy.
It's all about civic soul. We see that again highlighted in the April 20th meeting.
Oh, the arts presentation, right.
Yeah, the presentation titled Elevate the Arts.
Mm.
I mean, this is the council designing the theoretical future of their community, establishing that North Star is an essential function of local government.
Of course. A city without a master plan is really just a collection of roads.
Exactly. And here's the catch, those high-level strategies about civic pride, they rest entirely on a foundation of unglamorous, highly expensive physical maintenance.
Yeah, you can't attract businesses to a downtown if the foundational infrastructure is falling apart.
Right. And the paperwork shows this immediate financial pivot from planning the future to maintaining the present.
Yeah, let's talk about the April 20th consent calendar, because right alongside the civic arts presentations, the council is signing off on just massive capital expenditures for heavy machinery.
Literally heavy machinery.
Yes. They approved the purchase of a Vermeer wood chipper from RDO Equipment for exactly $104,967. And immediately following that, they approved $352,595 to Pepe Machinery.
And that was for what, excavators?
Yeah, a John Deere backhoe, a compact excavator, and a tilt trailer.
I love that.
Yeah.
A city council operates as a board of directors for what is essentially a heavy civil construction company.
That's such a good way to look at it. You're an architect and a groundskeeper at the exact same time.
Right. And the mechanism of how they purchase that machinery reveals a lot about how fast municipal government has to move.
Oh, you mean the consent calendar?
Yeah, exactly. Spending nearly $500,000 on John Deere excavators and industrial wood chippers is placed on the consent calendar. For you listening, that's the section of the agenda where routine items are passed in bulk with a single unanimous vote.
Which sounds crazy for $500,000, but...
But the philosophy here is bureaucratic survival. If a council spent its limited public hours debating the technical specs of a tilt trailer, the government would just gridlock.
they'd never get anything done.
Right. They isolate the philosophical debates for those special study sessions. But the heavy machinery required to actually build the city is purchased in the background.
Gotta keep the physical gears turning.
Okay, so we see how the city manages its own physical assets. But the legal mechanics get way more complicated when a municipality has to address a physical threat sitting in a resident's private backyard.
Oh, the weed abatement.
Yes.
Mhm.
Moving further into that April 20th agenda, there is a formal public hearing to establish a list of properties subject to the weed abatement program. The council actually adopts a resolution to authorize the fire chief to abate the nuisance of weeds and refuse growing on private property. And that's under Section 12.51 of the City Code, right?
Exactly. But I have to push back a little here. Like, requiring a formal public hearing and the direct authorization of the fire chief, that feels like a massive escalation for weed control.
It does sound extreme.
Right. Why isn't that just a standard landscaping or code enforcement issue? It frames it less like lawn care and more like an emergency response protocol.
Well, that framing is exactly the point. And it comes down to the regional reality of California.
Right. The fire risk.
Exactly. Yeah. In this specific ecosystem, a patch of overgrown, dry brush is not an aesthetic issue. It is severe fire fuel. A stray spark in some dry weeds can rapidly escalate into a devastating wildfire that threatens whole neighborhoods.
Oh, wow.
So, by categorizing the weeds as a fire hazard under Section 12.51, the city legally elevates the issue from a landscaping violation to a life safety threat.
Which is what justifies the state stepping in to eliminate it.
Precisely. Because crossing the boundary onto private property without consent requires a rigorous legal framework, like the Fourth Amendment demands that. So they have to use public safety mandates to dictate this action.
That makes total sense. And we see that same prioritization of physical safety translating into traffic regulations, too.
The school zones.
Yeah. The council held a hearing to amend the city code to reduce speed limits in school zones, dropping the prima facie speed limit from 25 miles per hour down to 15 or 20.
And just for clarity, prima facie basically means the default legal speed on a road, unless there are signs posting something else.
Right. Default speed.
And this local code amendment is actually enabled by state-level legislation, Assembly Bill 382. It's a great example of a municipality taking an operational tool provided by the state and applying it to their local environment.
But, changing the legal text of a speed limit is one thing. Updating the physical street requires actual funding.
Always comes back to the budget.
Yep. The council had to simultaneously adopt a resolution approving a budget amendment of $150,000 for citywide safety improvements just to implement this change.
Because when a city lowers a speed limit, they have to commission engineering studies, manufacture new reflective signage.
Pay union labor to install those signs.
Right, and potentially restripe the asphalt. The legal update demands a physical update.
And the physical update demands $150,000.
Exactly. And the financial burden of maintaining this baseline safety infrastructure is under severe macroeconomic pressure right now.
We definitely see that in the unfinished business section of the agenda. The city's emergency medical dispatch, or EMD services.
Right, the 911 medical calls.
Yeah.
They contract with the Santa Clara County Communications Department for that.
Yeah, this is the critical triage link between a resident having an emergency and the paramedics being dispatched. But the cost trajectory they are being asked to approve for this 2-year agreement is staggering.
It's a massive jump.
It really is. In fiscal year 27, the cost for the dispatch service is $170,256.
Okay.
In fiscal year 28, that number skyrockets to $329,803.
Wait, so the cost to maintain the exact same level of 911 dispatch is nearly doubling in a single 12-month period.
Pretty much exactly doubling. And the documents don't really provide a forensic breakdown of why, like if it's labor or technology cost increases from the county.
But the bottom line for the city is inescapable. A local government has to absorb these massive, non-negotiable surges in baseline emergency response costs before they can even think about those visionary civic arts projects they talked about earlier.
Right. And managing physical infrastructure and emergency services, at least that relies on somewhat objective metrics, like a fire hazard is present or it's not.
Right. A call is answered or it's not.
But the administrative operating system becomes infinitely more complicated when it has to manage the friction of human density.
Yeah, as a community grows, managing where people live and how businesses operate next to those people, that dominates the council's bandwidth.
And the April agendas show the city utilizing highly specialized mechanisms to govern that growth.
Because local governments aren't always equipped to handle the granular day-to-day casework of complex social programs, so they delegate.
Yeah, housing is the clearest example of this delegation. The council awarded a massive multi-year contract for $973,689 to an outside organization called Hello Housing.
And that's to administer the city's below-market rate housing program, the BMR.
Right, because administering affordable housing isn't just, zoning a parcel of land. It requires rigorous, ongoing casework.
Deep audits of applicant incomes, managing allocation lotteries, ensuring compliance year after year.
Yeah, the city is spending nearly $1 million to outsource this because they simply don't have the internal human resources to do it.
And we see a similar strategy of targeted delegation with homelessness. The council established a brand new City Council Homelessness Ad Hoc Subcommittee.
But instead of just using internal staff to run it, they brought in another external organization called Homebase to facilitate the meetings.
They're deploying these hyper-focused task forces and external experts to isolate acute social issues. It keeps the broader municipal machine moving forward.
But those external contracts don't solve the physical friction of, say, placing large-scale commercial development right next to residential neighborhoods.
Ah, the Amazon Data Center.
Yes. The April 6th minutes detail a really stark division during public comment about a proposed Gilroy Amazon data center. You had residents like Landon Sepulveda speaking firmly against the project, while residents like Ron Kirkish spoke in favor of it.
Just to pause here, for you listening, it is really important to note that our analysis is entirely neutral regarding the data center itself. We're not taking sides.
No, not at all. We just want to observe how the council processes this specific type of community friction.
Right, because the public comment period is the rawest form of democratic feedback. But the council can't govern purely on sentiment.
Yeah, how does a council balance massive corporate footprints with residents complaining about the noise literally bleeding into their backyards?
They have to translate those concerns into enforceable municipal code. And the mechanism they use to translate that friction is the zoning code.
Which brings us to a future agenda item requested by Councilmember Hilton. This specifically addresses industrial noise impacting residential zones, utilizing an amendment to Section 30.14.31 of the City Code.
People usually think of zoning as just drawing colored lines on a map.
Right, like red for commercial, green for residential.
Exactly. But it actually functions more like an invisible legal quarantine zone. The council is using Section 30.14.31 to regulate the performance standards of a commercial property.
So they're essentially trying to trap industrial decibels inside a property line so the noise doesn't reach the residents.
Exactly. That legal quarantine is how a city referees the collision between corporate ambition and residential peace. They don't just ask the corporation to keep it down. They engineer hyper-specific amendments to establish strict, measurable parameters.
Which is a huge administrative lift. I mean, managing these legal quarantines, auditing million-dollar housing programs, absorbing doubled emergency costs. It requires incredible processing power.
It's like a computer upgrading its RAM. If the city is growing in complexity, the internal administration has to scale up to handle it.
And the agendas reflect that rapid structural evolution. Like, the council consented to the appointment of Cindy Murphy as the new finance director, getting top-level oversight of these escalating budgets.
But the more profound shift is in the April 6th minutes, the appointment of Harjit Saina to the position of Assistant City Administrator.
Yeah, Mayor Bazo actually noted on the record that this is a brand new position. The role of Assistant City Administrator has literally never existed in Gilroy before.
They aren't just filling a vacancy, they are actively expanding their executive capacity.
But expanding internal roles is only part of the equation, right?
Yeah, because when a city experiences significant physical development, the regulatory bottleneck is almost always the building and fire plan review process. Before any structure can be built, a subdivision, a data center, the blueprints have to undergo intense scrutiny.
And the city clearly cannot manage this bottleneck internally. They awarded 4 separate contracts to outside consulting firms: Four Leaf, CSG Consultants, TRB Plus Associates, and True North Compliance Services.
And these are for standard and expedited building and fire plan review, plus inspection services.
Right. And here's the crazy part. Every single one of these 4 contracts has a not-to-exceed limit of $2 million.
Wow. So that's $8 million in authorized spending purely for outsourced regulatory review.
Massive.
But to understand why a city needs that level of outside firepower, you have to look at the legal liability. Approving modern building plans requires advanced structural engineering analysis, strict adherence to California's seismic codes, complex fire suppression calculations.
Yeah, a single municipality just can't keep enough specialized engineers on the payroll to process that volume during a growth phase.
They have to purchase outside expertise to mitigate the risk.
So all the data points toward this massive expansion. But the documents also show the council actively fighting to restrain the financial momentum of that expansion.
Oh, the pros consulting meeting on April 6th is a perfect illustration of this tension.
Yes. So city staff brought forward a proposal to hire pros consulting to conduct a recreation division assessment, and the proposed contract value was $372,690.
Which, Next to $8 million for building inspections, $300,000 might seem like pennies. But the council balked at the price tag.
They did. After hearing public comment opposing the contract, the council did not just rubber stamp the request. Councilmember Klein intervened directly, moving to strictly cap the dollar figure of the assessment at $225,000.
Which is a huge cut.
Yeah, it forced the city staff and the consultant to go back to the negotiating table to figure out the maximum scope of work they could deliver for a severely reduced price.
And that motion passed, right.
Yeah.
Though it highlights some internal division because Councilmember Bracco voted against it.
Right. But slashing nearly $150,000 fundamentally changes what the consultant will investigate.
It forces the city staff to relentlessly prioritize. And that exchange just captures the inherent tension of local governance perfectly. The administration desperately needs to expand its capacity to improve services, but the elected council must aggressively guard the taxpayer's purse.
Demanding absolute efficiency from the operating system.
Exactly.
So, to wrap this up, we began by looking at the theoretical architecture of a city. The study sessions where the mayor and council charted a visionary course for downtown.
And then we slammed into the granular reality of execution buying John Deere backhoes and wood chippers to maintain the physical environment.
Right. We analyzed how public safety mandates forced the city into private property for weed abatement and how baseline emergency dispatch costs are surging to, unprecedented levels.
We unpacked how they managed the friction of human density, spending $1 million outsourcing affordable housing to Hello Housing and using zoning codes as invisible quarantines against industrial noise.
And finally, we examined the municipal government structurally evolving, adding unprecedented executive roles and authorizing millions in external engineering firepower, all while trying to negotiate down the cost of consultants on the council floor.
It is a massive, highly calibrated machine.
It really is. But looking through the April 6th minutes, there is one final item listed under the introduction of new business. It's really brief, but it hints at a massive external force. The item is titled, Proposed High-Speed Rail Tax Increment Financing.
And that single line item is the ultimate external variable.
Wait, what exactly is tax increment financing, or TIF?
Well, TIF is a mechanism where a government borrows against the future increased property tax revenue that a massive project is expected to generate in order to pay for the project's upfront costs today.
Oh, wow. So it essentially rewrites the financial future of the municipality based on a projected outcome.
Precisely. And the provocative thought I want to leave you with today is this. How does a statewide, multi-billion-dollar infrastructure project like the California high-speed rail eventually crash into this highly calibrated local ecosystem?
That's a huge question.
Right, because when a force of that magnitude comes through a municipality, it brings an entirely new scale of financial mechanisms like TIF that have the potential to completely rewrite local budgets, overhaul zoning codes, and physically alter the landscape in ways that make a new wood chipper or a noise complaint look entirely insignificant.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that no matter how well a local government manages its internal operating system, it is always vulnerable to massive external updates.